Welcome to the first episode of our weekly Al-Monitor webinar series on the Israel-Hamas war and its impact on the region. I'm Andrew Parasolidi, president of Al-Monitor. This war started last Saturday, October 7th, when Hamas, the Islamist terrorist group which rules Gaza, attacked Israel by ground and missile attack, including the massacres of Israeli civilians, among them women and children. Israel has retaliated with a massive bombardment of Gaza, leveling buildings and cutting off electricity, fuel, and water to the enclave of over 2 million Palestinians, where already over 300,000 residents have been displaced. Over 1,200 Israelis and more than 1,400 Palestinians have been killed so far in this conflict, with scores injured on both sides. U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken is in Israel today. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin will be there this weekend. Blinken says U.S. support for Israel is ironclad, and the U.S. is sending additional firepower to the region. At least 25 Americans have been killed, with an estimated 20 or so missing and presumed abducted as hostages, among the dozens of Israelis and some other foreign nationals also held captive, which Hamas has threatened to kill if Israel undertakes certain military actions in Gaza. There are concerns about a regional escalation. Israeli warplanes have hit Syria, and there have been skirmishes along the Israel-Lebanon border, but these have so far been limited. Now, to discuss the Israel-Hamas war and what we might expect to see happen next, we are joined by Al-Monitor's Israel correspondent, Ben Caspit, who is joining us today from Tel Aviv, and Al-Monitor Palestine columnist Daoud Kuttab, coming to us today from Amman, Jordan. If you want to ask a question, please submit via the Q&A function on your Zoom screen. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. Let's get right into it. Ben, I'm going to start with you. Israel is expected to launch a ground invasion of Gaza. Yesterday, the government said they want to change the strategic reality there. What does that mean? And what, in your view, is required, or what the Israeli government and military thinks is required to defeat Hamas? That operation, I would think, loaded with risk, given the crowded urban landscape, the Israeli and foreign hostages Hamas is holding, in addition to the potential for even further and substantial casualties among Israeli soldiers and Palestinian civilians.
Thank you for having me, Andrew, and I'll try to answer. We have a rare consensus right now in the Israeli society that the day after this event, which many of us compare to the Holocaust, including myself, I never used the name Holocaust in my life to anything but the Holocaust. But after what we saw on Saturday, many of us think differently. So the consensus is that in the day after, Hamas will not be here. Our Chief of Staff, General Herzi Halevi, just spoke, and if he even answered questions and said, we're going to smash Hamas, and named the leaders of Hamas. Most of them were released from jail by Benjamin Netanyahu in the Shalit bargain deal back in 2011. No one of them should be alive in the day after. And the reason is simple. We live in a very difficult neighborhood. People will call it a jungle. And what happened on Saturday is that the Israeli deterrence that we leaned on here for 75 years was smashed. So no one thinks in the deals in the checks and balances and the rules of the past. The past is until Friday. The IDF will have to go in. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu told it to President Biden, we're going to come in. But I don't think it will rush in, because right now they gather intelligence from the Hamas terrorists that are captured in Israel, what exactly is waiting the Israeli soldiers when they will be in, because Hamas proved that it is a very serious, vicious, strong, and even the capabilities of Hamas were a lot higher than we expected. So we have to assume that there is a trap in Gaza. So right now they are learning what trap can it be. But on the other hand, although most of the world now is on Israel's side, no one here is hoping that it will long for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 3 months. The window of time, the window of opportunity is not very wide, it's narrow. So if I gamble that in the next week we will see the war physically in Gaza, I'm afraid this will be a gamble that will succeed.
Daoud, let me bring you in on this. Given the expectation of very, very difficult fighting ahead that Gaza is already suffering, what does Hamas hope to achieve in the coming showdown? How do you see this playing out for Gaza, for the Palestinians there, and for Hamas? What is their end game?
Well, Hamas's end game is to survive. They want to survive, and they want to be around when the ceasefire is going to be called. They say that they have prepared for every alternative possibility of what Israel is going to do. And as we have been surprised about what they were able to do on October 7th, I would expect that this will not be a picnic for the Israeli army, even it's a very, very well-trained army. But the Palestinians have had years to think. Many of them speak Hebrew and understand the Israeli mentality, and they know what Israel is about. So I think that just going in to smash them and smash them and smash them, the result basically is going to be most of the smashing will affect the civilians, and cutting off water and electricity, which is a war crime, is not going to help in smashing Hamas. Hamas probably has enough water and food and electricity. It's the rest of the population that is suffering. So what does it mean? What does Hamas want? Hamas feels that they have done what no one is able to do. The Palestinian political leadership has been trying and speaking for years. Where is the political horizon? Give people hope. Without hope, there's going to be an explosion. Nothing happened. The Palestinian activists have been trying to do the boycott and the BDS movement. That has been delegitimized in the US. The Palestinian legal people have been trying to do the International Criminal Court. That has not produced anything. So the Hamas says, you know, we will do something, and they have done whatever they did. Again, you know, the fact is that they broke through a very, very powerful siege. They dismantled the Israeli military structures and opened the area that has been closed for 16 years, which actually allowed a lot of regular people to enter, and to people who've been frustrated for years. And some of the atrocities probably were also carried out by individuals and not just by Hamas. I'm not absolving Hamas, but I'm just saying that once the borders was open and people who've been cooped up for 16 years in a siege, they reacted crazily. Now, the question is, what does Hamas want? Basically, they want their prisoners to be released and in a prisoner exchange. To reach that, they need to survive, and they need to make sure that whoever they took are still around, and the Israelis will eventually have to negotiate for them, if that is in the books. Nobody expects that to happen until the fighting is stopped, and until the Israelis have done whatever they had to do. And as Ben said, there is a window because of the international support, but we're slowly seeing a lot of the propaganda has been lies. The beheading of babies has been proven to be lies, and there's so much other things that slowly we're seeing are going to be the disinformation that's been going on, and even President Biden fell for it, will slowly come out. And again, there has been atrocities. I'm not justifying them. I'm just saying, as an observer, I think what we need to do is look at the context, and for sure, we all need a political horizon. There is no military solution. Yes, you know, okay, try to smash Hamas, but if you cannot smash them, they will still be around, what are you going to do? We still have to deal with the population that's under siege, with the Palestinians under occupation, settlements that have grown 3 times since we made the Oslo Accord. So we have a problem, and we need to kind of face up to it and talk about two-state solution. That you don't mean it means nothing. You need to go and mean what you say what you mean. If you believe in two-state solution, first thing you should do is recognize state of Palestine under occupation and let the Palestinian leadership, the secular Palestinian leadership, the PLO, begin negotiating with the state of Israel about the borders and about how to protect each other and ensure that there is safety on both sides of whatever borders there are.
Ben, just picking up on what Daoud said, do you think that the prospect of a revived process toward peace or giving life to a two-state solution, as was being discussed in terms of the Israel-Saudi normalization talks brokered by the United States prior to the outbreak of this war, does that get a second chance after the war? Is this something that you think this Israeli government is able to contemplate as part of the end game?
I'm happy that we are talking about hope while we are in an event full of atrocities, blood and fire. But I like this idea. I have to comment about what my friend Daoud just said about the siege. My opinion on this: the current Israeli government, very right-wing and extreme, is, I guess, very similar to Daoud's. But when we talk about Hamas, let's remember that in the year 2005, Ariel Sharon, the godfather of the settlements, decided unilaterally to get out of Gaza. He kicked away close to 10,000 Israeli settlers that lived there for 30 or 40 years. He kicked them away. They took the dead from the cemeteries and went out until the last inch of Gaza as a pilot to peace. On the same moment, if the Palestinians would rise to the occasion, it was the sky was the limit. We could get billions of dollars from Europe and the United States and build them a Hong Kong. The retaliation was Hamas in power. They kicked the leaders and the warriors of the Palestinian Authority from the roofs in Gaza, and they built a second Hamastan in Gaza. So this pilot collapsed, but let's not talk about it too much. Benjamin Netanyahu, at the time, I think I'm the fiercest critic of him in Israel, just agreed in that, I think it's the 20th time, to the two-state solution. He came into, I think, 3 sessions of what we call the Sharem process with the Americans, with the head of the Shin Bet, with the Palestinians in Sharem, in Aqaba, reassuring all the agreements, etc., etc. What we got here, Andrew and Daoud, is the collapse of the Netanyahu conception that if he weakens the PA and strengthens Hamas, the terrorists, he will be safe, because he will not be able. He will not be. There will be no partner on the Palestinian side, because they are here and there, and the Hamas, the platform of Hamas don't believe in the two-state solution. The only thing they had to do in order to get the siege, to get rid of the siege, is recognize Israel's right to exist, and recognize that all the treaties and the bargains and the deals between Israel and PA, and stop making terror. This is what we call the 3 conditions of the quartet, if we remember. This is ancient history, and they refused because their platform, their agenda is religious. We are the sons of the pigs and the dogs. All the land of Palestine is Waqf, and we don't have to talk to no two-state solution. So what I hope is that in the day after, Hamas will not be dominant anymore. The Netanyahu concept just collapsed. So it's about time to try and start thinking about the day after. And then, of course, we can start talking about easing the tensions between the extreme settlers and the Palestinians. The situation there is very bad. the nomination of Ben Gvir and Smotrich to be in charge of all these territories is terrible. We know it. But when we are talking about Hamas, this is totally different, because Hamas is ISIS. And if you want, I can show you all the pictures and all the videos that I saw for 5 long days and nights, and I couldn't get to sleep.
Daoud, we have a question from one of our viewers, and again, a reminder to all of our viewers that you can submit your questions via the Q&A function on Zoom. Do you see, how do you see the prospects for the Palestinian Authority? Secretary of State Blinken will be meeting with President Abbas in Ramallah as part of his trip. What's the expectation there? And do you think the Palestinian Authority can survive this war?
Well, there's 2 thoughts on this issue. Some argue that Hamas gave the PA new life, and that, as Ben said, they were denied, and now Israel got, what it wanted by supporting Hamas and denying the PLO. Now the world saw what Hamas can do, and hopefully the world will come back to not only Abbas, but basically the secular national movement, not the religious movement. When you talk about the religion, I mean, yes, Hamas is extremely religious, but Ben Gvir and others in the current government didn't put out the fires. They actually added oil to the fire. By the last 3 days before this event happened, Jordan complained about what happened. And in fact, tourists who visited me yesterday said they were in Jerusalem, they were hearing the Jewish prayers on Al-Aqsa Mosque. So that, again, kindled the religious war between Jews and Muslims, and that was terrible. And anyway, so back to the question, we need a new blood. We need, apparently in December, Fatah is having its Congress, and hopefully there will be some new blood. Mahmoud Abbas is too old and too long in his position to understand, to deal with the situation. But politically, he's said and done the right things. There hasn't been a more peaceful, non-violent Palestinian leader in the history of Palestine, and he was trashed. He was paid no attention to because he wasn't a threat. So tell us, Israelis, what do you want? Do you want tough people who smash you and kill you, or do you want a peace-loving person? You can't have it both ways, complain about Hamas and crush Hamas, and at the same time are not delivering anything to the Palestinian secular non-violent leadership. And I think if we can get out of this, with our heads high somehow and survive this terrible thing that's going to happen in days and weeks ahead, we need to start thinking of finding a solution. We have to give people hope. We have to have a political horizon, and nobody can talk about, I don't want to hear the word two-state solution again, unless somebody is actually believing in it. To say two-state solution, you must recognize both states and not just the Israeli state. So the PA is in bad shape. It needs to be rejuvenated, needs new blood, new ideas. But right now, we need to have a ceasefire. We're in bad shape, and things are not improving in the West Bank. Number of people being killed. The closure of the West Bank has been terrible. Both family and friends are suffering. So we need to get out of this stupid cycle of violence all the time, and revenge. What is happening in Gaza right now is not a military solution. It's a revenge. It's an attempt to give the Israeli people idea that their government, the failed government, which allowed this thing to happen because Netanyahu is so, into his own judicial issue that he left the wheels. He was sleeping on the wheel, and so drunk in power that they don't care. Don't worry about Hamas. Look what happened. We're all going to pay the price of what happened. It's not the Israelis. Yes, the direct killings with Israelis, but the Palestinians already are paying the price, and they will continue to pay the price. We need to get out of this cycle of violence. And yes, we do need a rejuvenated PLO. But right now, we need a pathway, we need a strategy, and not just revenge and cycle of violence.
Ben, I have a question here regarding the regional dimension to the conflict. What are the latest expectations within Israel that a second or even third front could open via Hezbollah in the north in Lebanon, where there have already been exchanges of fire, or from the West Bank? Is there any thought that that is still a possibility?
Yes, this is the, I think, number one worry of the Israeli leaders and commanders, military commanders right now. The IDF sent a lot of forces, unprecedented forces to the north, mainly armored. And here we can talk about the United States of America that sent 2 carriers to the sea in front of Lebanon, including an unprecedented speech by President Biden. I can tell you that many Israelis just wept when they heard it, how this president is standing in this time of urgency, and when many people here, first time in their life, start thinking about existential threats. So the worry about the second front is very, very relevant. And of course, the number one nominee to open this front is Hassan Nasrallah. And I think in the last few days, Nasrallah got many messages from all the envoys between the sides, and we have many envoys, that if he makes the mistake that he made in 2006, and back in 2006, he said in his own voice it was a mistake. This time he will pay the price fully, and exactly like we are talking now about Gaza, about Lebanon. He will not be out of this thing alive. And he got also confirmation from the President of the United States in the word don't. From here to tell you that I'm sure that the second front will not be open, because in the last few days, almost every hour, something happens in the north. It can be a drone, it can be terrorists that are trying to get into Israel, and they got at least twice or three times into Israel and got killed by the army, but succeeded killing a few of the Israeli soldiers. So it's a very, very delicate situation. I want to mention about what Daoud said about the revenge. I'm not an expert in revenge, but it's the operation in Gaza, Daoud, is not only a revenge. You know, this is a feeling, a human feeling, and no Israeli that is seeing what happened is not feeling, can save or avoid the revenge feeling. But the main motive is what I said in the beginning. The awareness, the crystal clear awareness that if we let this not so powerful and big terrorist organization humiliate the IDF, the intelligence, the mighty Israeli intelligence. By the way, it was mainly an intelligence exactly like 50 years ago, exactly. The concept of they will not attack, I'm talking about Egypt and Syria, and the concept that the Hamas is deterred. And if we will not retaliate in a way that all our enemies around us in this jungle will remember and see and know that you cannot do it to Israel. You cannot behead children and babies. You cannot kidnap grannies on wheelchairs. You cannot get into the houses of civilians and just burn them alive. You cannot do it. So this is, I wanted to know, this is the motive. The motive is do something before, because your blood is in the water, and the sharks around us is feeling it and smelling it. And I really hope it will be the shortest possible. And we all have to hope, even in Amman, maybe even in Washington, D.C., that there will not be second front, especially in the North Front. About Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, situation is very delicate. This is a place that Daoud and I agree upon. We have our extremists and you have yours. So right now, the most important thing that happened is the enlarging of the Israeli coalition with Benny Gantz, Gadi Eisenkot, and Gideon Sa'ar, the leaders that are not, they don't feel, they don't owe anything to Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and they will try to put some cold water on the fire instead of oil. And let's all hope that everybody in this front, I'm talking about the West Bank, will be responsible and at least will be able to hold life there as normal as possible.
Daoud, we have a number of questions about Egypt's role in the Rafah border crossing. Could you begin by commenting broadly about Egypt and perhaps other Arab states in engagement? We were talking, the three of us, prior to the broadcast about the situation in Jordan. We know that Qatar has been involved in trying to help negotiate on the hostage issue, but Egypt in particular has a very central role bordering Gaza. Will Egypt open the Rafah border crossing, and should Egypt and other Arab countries take Palestinians in who are being displaced by this conflict?
That's a very important question. Unfortunately, the Egyptians have been cooperating with the Israelis to generally keep the siege on Gaza, and that's a terrible mistake. The Egyptians hate the Muslim Brotherhood as much as the Israelis, and there was no love lost between the two parties. But Egypt has been trying to find and mediate with the Israelis. Right now, I think yesterday or today, the Egyptians agreed that there will be a ship, a plane full of medicine and food that will fly to Al-Arish and will go into Gaza, because the Israelis have been threatening any trucks coming from Egypt will be bombed. But apparently the Jordanians have some kind of good credit with the Israelis that some of the food and medicine coming from Jordan via Al-Arish could go in. But that's 2 million people. You need a lot more than just one plane of medicine and food. But the Egyptians are, we're not sure exactly what their endpoint is or what they're trying to do. They're under pressure from the Americans and the Israelis, and they have said the right things on air, but the borders have been quite difficult for Gazans to leave and to come back. Now, the question about leaving Gaza is very, very sensitive because it brings back the Nakba. Ben talked about the Holocaust, but we talk about the Nakba. The Nakba is when Palestinians left and the Israelis say, your leaders told you to leave, so they can't come back. And so the Arab countries cannot be involved in encouraging Palestinians to leave Gaza. And certainly in Jordan, they're really worried about claims by the extremist Israelis who say Jordan is Palestine, and so on and so forth. So it's a very delicate issue. The siege has been both in food and belongings as well as in movement of people. And Egypt every now and then opens the borders to allow people in and out, but it's not a regular border. And the Egyptians wait till there is a solution with Israel before they open the borders.
Ben, a question for you. It's been noted and widely reported on, including your reporting, about how Israel was surprised by the scope and timing of the attack from Hamas on Israel. Apparently, others were surprised. There's been a great deal of discussion about Iranian engagement, and I see that the New York Times this morning has weighed in by saying that the Iranians also were surprised. Many others feel that Iran is complicit in the attack. What's the sense in Israel at this time from the latest sourcing about the Iranian role and the feelings about how Iran, from Israel's perspective, should be envisioned in terms of its relationship with Hamas?
Yes, this is what we call the $64 billion question, because it was a huge crisis, a huge failure of intelligence. And we had all these reports that the Egyptians, even the intelligence minister of Egypt, warned Israel 10 days or 7 days or 3 days before the attack that something is going in Gaza. Now we know, by the way, I don't think, and as I wrote in Al-Monitor, that there was a conversation between the Minister of Defense of Intelligence, the Egyptian, and Netanyahu, but I know for sure that Egyptian intelligence officials were talking to their colleagues in the Israeli side, but it was not specific. It was really like something is happening in Gaza. And when you have a concept in Israel that Hamas is deterred, they don't want a war, we are allowing 18,000 Hamas workers a day to work in Israel in order to help, when Daoud is talking about the siege, to help the Gazan economy. These 18,000 workers in Israel is a huge part of the Gazan GOP. It holds a million people with the head above the water, because they earn in Israel 10 times more than they earn in Gaza if they find work in Gaza. So the intelligence thing is crucial. Now Iran now is trying to escape from responsibility. We had many reports about a lot of meetings between Iranians and Hamas officials, Iranians and jihad officials. We know that Iran is funding Hamas $70 million a year and Islamic Jihad $30 million a year. We know that Iran is supplying a lot of knowledge and a lot of know-how. The question is if we will be able to find the smoking gun that will prove that Iran had something to do. I'm talking about something operational. Is it clear that they were surprised, like what you just said, Andrew, and Daoud noted, or they're just trying to now to differentiate themselves? Because I can tell you, if there will be a proof that this is an Iranian operation, or at least they are part of it, or they preach for it, I think that you can expect even a military Israeli operation inside Iran. I reported in Al-Monitor several times that Prime Minister Naftali Bennett changed the Israeli strategy in Iran. No more retaliating only to the proxies. If we get something from Iranian proxy in Israel, a terror attack or something, we will hit Tehran. And he did it a few times, according to a foreign media. So in this current crisis in Israel, in this current shock and shock waves all over Israel that until a few days ago was required itself an empire, I will not be surprised if the Iranians will have to pay as well. But we are not there yet. Right now, we want to know what's going on in Gaza, in Hamas, and let's all hope and pray that it will stop in Gaza and Hamas, and let's all hope and pray, like what Daoud said, that after, the day after, or the week after, or the month after, we will be able to start talking about negotiation again, and we will have one address in the Palestinian territories, the Palestinian Authority, and we will be able to restart the whole thing all over again.
Daoud, a question for you. The Al-Aqsa Mosque has been considered a flashpoint in Jerusalem. In fact, in Hamas and justifying the timing of its attack referred to what they referred to as provocations. And this has been all noted recently. This has been a concern of many in the region, especially since this right-wing government has been formed in Israel. At the Middle East Global Summit in New York last month, the Al-Monitor Semaphore Middle East Global Summit, King Abdullah talked about this. He talked about it in his UN address, about the urgency of the situation in Israel, in Palestine, at the holy places. Could you comment on that flashpoint? What are your concerns right now about Jerusalem and where it is? And how do you see the situation in Jordan and how Jordan and King Abdullah is viewing the current crisis?
Will you give me 20 minutes? Anyway, Al-Aqsa, let me just say one thing. Religious people have deep, passionate belief in whatever they believe in, and they don't compromise. The Jewish fundamentalists don't compromise their beliefs, the Muslim don't compromise, and the Christian fundamentalists don't compromise. So, by God, keep the religious people out of this conflict. It's a political conflict. Now, coming to Al-Aqsa, it's a holy place, third holy place, a holy mosque for Muslims, for 2 billion Muslims. Jordan, under the King Abdullah, are responsible to manage this area. They have 1,000 people on the Jordanian payroll, and teachers and guards and administrators and so on. Jordan and Netanyahu in 2014, with John Kerry mediating, reached an agreement. Agreement's very simple. Al-Aqsa is for Muslims to pray, for all others to visit. And the details of the agreement say that the visitors should not be people who are religiously or fundamentalists, should not be repeat visitors, should not be large groups. All of this agreement has been violated. And every day, it's like a slippery slope. Every day, they're trying to get more and more and more. And they're being covered by the minister of police is one of these guys. He's the one who wants to turn Al-Aqsa Mosque into a Jewish temple, or at least to have the right to pray, or whatever. So we have a hot potato in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and everybody says there's something called the status quo agreement. There's an agreement that keeps things as they are. Don't mess around with religious stuff. It burns it burns everything it touches. Everybody uses the religion. Religion becomes a hotspot. So this attack by Hamas is called the Al-Aqsa tsunami, because they're using the word Al-Aqsa. So yes, Jordan has managed this mosque. Jordan is responsible for this mosque. Their guards are protecting the mosque, except in one gate, which the Israelis kicked out the Muslim guard, Al-Mughrabi gate. But we need to keep Al-Aqsa Mosque and the religious people on all sides out of this conflict. This is a political conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, and it needs a political solution.
Ben, a question for you. Israel now has a national unity government. Benny Gantz has joined Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition. What does this mean for Netanyahu, combining the national unity government, the crisis, and what you talked about earlier, the intelligence failure, and this really defining moment for Israel and for him? How do you see the politics of this playing out?
It's not a whole national unity government. National unity is when you have all the main forces of the Zionist parties, and you don't, because Yair Lapid and Avigdor Lieberman decided to stay out, and only Benny Gantz stepped in with his 12 Knesset members. In a poll that we'll publish tomorrow, Benny Gantz will have more than 40 Knesset members. It's huge, and it shows us where Israeli politics is going to. But what Netanyahu needed is legitimization, because he lost all his credibility. He was Mr. Security, the guardian of Israel, and on his watch, this thing happened, and this is the worst disaster and catastrophe since the establishment of the state of Israel. The worst, because right now we are in 1,300 slaughtered. It will be finished in 1,600, and I'll remind you that the whole Yom Kippur War, the disaster, was 2,800 in a month, not in a single day, and no civilians, only soldiers. So Netanyahu needed something to refuel his legitimacy as a leader, and he also needed the experience of two chief of staff, Gadi Eisenkot and Benny Gantz, to put them along all these unexperienced pyromaniacs in the cabinet. So right now, and as we know Netanyahu, he will try within 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, he will try to get the credit and put the blame on Gantz. This is the Netanyahu stunt. But right now, the people of Israel needed a change, and they got it, not completely, but they got it. And this Netanyahu needs right now Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot standing beside him, not Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. The terrible thing is that he declined the Yair Lapid offer. Yair Lapid wanted to get in as well, but he said, listen, if you will kick out the pyromaniacs and extremists, I'm talking about the Zionist, the religious Zionism party, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, I will get in. Netanyahu was not willing to kick them out because he needs this solid rock, 64 members, to his own needs, opportunistic needs. So this is very bad news. But the establishment of a new cabinet of war with Gideon Sa'ar, Benny Gantz, and Gadi Eisenkot is good news. So everything, Andrew, is relative.
Daoud, a question for you. During Secretary Blinken's trip to Israel, and which will include the West Bank, what are the perceptions among Palestinians of the U.S. role in the conflict? And the question reads, do you believe that after this conflict, the region will be closer to a Palestinian state?
I think Palestinians were disappointed with Obama. They were disappointed with Biden. He visited Ramallah, Bethlehem, and gave nothing to the Palestinians except lip service and the legitimization that he has given to the Israelis, not only to crush Hamas, but it is basically to cover up any carpet bombing that's going to take place in Gaza and killing a lot of innocent people, has turned off many to the Americans. But the day after the ceasefire, yes, I mean, that's the whole idea. The U.S. has the power. In fact, they have a power today. It's actually one of the few things that the president doesn't need the Congress to. He can recognize the Palestinian state without the Congress supporting it. All he has to do is tell his UN representative not to veto a resolution, and the Palestinian state would be established and recognized. And then he can encourage the leaders of Palestine to negotiate with the leaders of Israel on everything, borders, security, anything else. And that would be the proper way. Will he do it? Will he not do it? There will be election campaign going on. Nobody knows. But right now, Americans are not held in high space, especially the President Biden himself. Even the Democrats are seen more, at least until October 7th, much more supporting the Palestinian cause than the Republicans. But today, the whole world is against, not only, hopefully only against Hamas, but unfortunately, the Palestinians are going to be pulled in to the Hamas situation. And what everyone is trying to do and to say is, look, guys, we've been telling you, we've been warning you, give people hope. And I want, if we're going to close, I want to close with this. Palestinians want to have peace. They want to live in peace and freedom, just like the Israelis. We want to live side by side. There's no time for continuing this stupid, ugly cycle of violence, killing and killing again, and killing and revenge and pre-attacks and after attacks. They're useless. We need to have a different paradigm, and the paradigm is, let's start a process that is the conditioner on movement, not on the Israelis' whim or whether Ben Gvir wants it or not. Let's start a movement to bring about an end to the conflict and to the occupation and the creation of two states, a secure and democratic Palestinian state alongside a safe Israel. That is the best and needed solution. No other solution exists. Everything else is apartheid or continuation of occupation, and none of us want that.
Gentlemen, we're just about out of time. Any final words and very brief before we sign off, Ben?
I think we saw on Saturday a huge Hamas victory, but I think even Hamas is aware right now it was a Pyrrhic victory. They're stuck now. They dreamed about 1 or 2 or 3 Israeli kidnapped soldiers or civilians. They're stuck now with 200. With 2, they could get a sea harbor and 1,000 prisoners. With 200, they will not get anything, just blood, fire, sweat, and tears. We all hope it will be ended very soon. But one final remark about what just Daoud said, and I agree totally to what he said. I just remember that during the years, we had a few plans of peace, one by President Clinton, one by President Obama, one by Secretary Kerry, one by Prime Minister Olmert. To all these plans, Israel said yes, and the Palestinians said no or never replied. So right now, if you ask me, Andrew, I think I agree with Daoud. I would declare a Palestinian state, like David Ben-Gurion just did in 1948. What we got from the UN was not a state, was a sausage. No, you cannot defend this, but he said yes and declared the state. Listen, rise to the occasion of the history. Declare a state. Let's see who will say no, we don't accept it. At least in the West Bank, do it, and then we'll start to negotiate.
Daoud, brief final word.
I'm happy with Ben Caspit's support for a Palestinian state under occupation, and let's hope for the best for our peoples. We don't want anybody to die. We don't want anybody to suffer. We want to have a prosperous region, and we want to be the leaders of a prosperous region. We want the soldiers to come into Israel. We want everybody to normalize with Israel. They just need to pay the price. You cannot occupy land forever.
I want to thank you both. The reminder to our viewers, this is the first in a series of webinars we're going to do weekly about the Israel-Hamas war. Daoud, Ben, thank you again. You've set a high bar for this conversation. It's one of the best I've observed. I was pleased and honored to be a part of it. To our viewers, you can read Ben and Daoud every week, twice a week. Ben, Daoud does a weekly newsletter. It's a must-read. Both of their columns are must-reads at Al-Monitor, where you should also be following our world-class reporting from the region. Thank you. Thanks to our viewers. Thanks for the great questions. And thank you to our speakers today.
Thank you, Andrew.